He
You
looked me
knew
in
this
the
would
eye,
happen.
in front of 300 guests, and said he couldn't marry someone who had nothing to offer.
I can't do it.
Not love, not loyalty, nothing. Then he laughed, like it was a joke we were all supposed to understand, while his mother shook her head and whispered loud enough for the front row to hear, "We warned him." I stood there in a $12,000 dress I didn't pay for, holding vows I had memorized for 6 months, realizing in less than 10 seconds that I had just been turned into a spectacle. And the worst part? He wasn't done yet. If this story speaks to your heart, take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if it truly resonates with you, and tell me where you're watching from and what your local time is right now. I always read every comment. My name is Emily Carter. I'm 29 years old, and that night, standing under a chandelier in a ballroom in downtown Chicago, was the moment my fiancé tried to erase me in front of everyone who mattered. But to understand why he thought he could do that, you need to know how carefully I let him believe I was nothing. It didn't start at the wedding. It started 8 months earlier, with a decision I didn't tell anyone about. Jason Miller loved money. Not in the normal, responsible, I want to be stable kind of way. He loved it like it was oxygen, like it defined who you were and what you deserved. I saw it the third time we went out, when he asked what my parents did before he asked what I liked to do. I saw it again when the check came, and he hesitated for just a second too long, like he was calculating my value against the total. And I definitely saw it the night he told me. Flat, casual, like it was common sense. I just don't believe in building a life with someone who can't contribute at the same level. He didn't know I could. He didn't know anything about the trust fund sitting untouched in my name, or the company I technically owned but never talked about, or the fact that I had spent the last 3 years living far below my means on purpose. I didn't correct him. I didn't defend myself. I watched. That was the first rule I made for myself. Watch, don't react. Because something about the way he said it felt rehearsed, like this wasn't a belief he had formed over time, it was a filter he used on people. And I needed to know if I passed it, or if I was just another number he hadn't calculated yet. So I made a choice. I stopped wearing the things I normally wore. No designer labels, no subtle signals of wealth, nothing that could tip him off. I told him I worked a modest marketing job, which wasn't a lie, just not the full truth. I let him pick the restaurants, the plans, the pace, and slowly, almost predictably, the way he treated me started to change. At first, it was small. Comments that sounded like jokes but landed a little too sharp. "You're lucky I don't mind covering dinner." Or, "You've got a simple lifestyle, huh?" Then it got clearer. Calder. "You don't really have ambition, do you?" he asked me one night, leaning back in his chair like he was interviewing me. I remember smiling, nodding, like it didn't sting. I wasn't poor. I wasn't lost. I was measuring him, and the more I stayed quiet, the more he revealed. By the time he proposed, I already knew the answer. I just needed him to say it out loud. And he did. On our wedding night, in front of everyone. What I didn't expect was who would stand up when he did. Jason did not change overnight. That was the part people never understood. There was no single moment where he became cruel. It was a pattern, slow and precise, like watching a crack spread across glass, until one day the whole thing shattered, and I saw it clearly the first time he invited me to dinner with his family, at their house in Naperville, a 5,000-square-foot place with marble floors and a staircase that curved like something out of a magazine. His mother opened the door, looked at me from head to toe, and smiled the kind of smile that never reached her eyes. "So this is Emily," she said, like she was evaluating a purchase, not meeting her son's fiancé, and Jason just stood there, proud, like he had brought home something to be approved, not someone to be loved. Dinner that night was quiet at first, polite. His father asked what I did. I told him I worked in marketing, which again was true, just not complete, and he nodded slowly, like he was filing that information into a category he had already decided. "Stable," he said, then added, "Not exactly high ceiling, though." Like I was not sitting right there, like I was a report he was reviewing. Jason laughed, actually laughed, and said, "She is not really the career type." And that was the moment I realized something important. He was not defending me because he agreed with them, not just privately, but comfortably, openly, like it was obvious, like it was truth. And I remember sitting there with a glass of water I had not touched, thinking, this is it. "This is the test." And I said nothing. I let it happen, because every word they spoke told me more than anything they could have hidden. Over the next few weeks, it escalated. Not dramatically, not in a way you could easily point to, but in small moments that stacked up until they became impossible to ignore. Jason would make comments about my apartment, a small one-bedroom on the north side. "It is cute," he would say, pausing just long enough before adding, "For now," like it was temporary, like I was temporary. He started suggesting I move in with him, not because he wanted to build a life together, but because, as he put it just makes more sense financially. Everything with him came back to that word, financially, value, return, investment. And I watched how he treated other people too, waiters, cashiers, anyone he believed had less than him. His tone would shift, subtle but unmistakable, polite enough to pass, but never equal, never respectful. And every time, I told myself the same thing: watch, do not react, because the more comfortable he felt, the more honest he became. Daniel was there for a lot of those moments, always just a step back, quieter than Jason, observing in a way that made you feel like he was noticing details everyone else missed. The first time I met him was at a rooftop bar downtown. Jason introduced him as his best friend since college. Daniel shook my hand, held my gaze a second longer than most people do, and said, "Nice to meet you, Emily." Like he meant it, like he saw me. Not my job, not my clothes, not my perceived value, just me. And it threw me off more than anything Jason had said that night, because it was so different. Over time, I started to notice that Daniel rarely laughed at Jason's comments about money or status. He would stay quiet, sometimes change the subject, sometimes just watch. And there was one night, about 3 months before the wedding, that stayed with me more than any other. We were at dinner, a group of 6. Jason had ordered a bottle of wine that cost more than my monthly rent, and when the check came, one of the women at the table joked about splitting it evenly. Jason smirked and said, "Let us be realistic, not everyone at this table can keep up." And then he looked directly at me, not subtle, not accidental, direct, deliberate. And the table went quiet for a second. Just a second, but it was enough. Enough for everyone to understand what he meant. I smiled, nodded, said, "You are right," like I agreed, like I accepted it. And that was the moment Daniel spoke. Not loudly, not dramatically, just one sentence, calm, steady. Or maybe not everyone here needs to prove anything. Jason brushed it off, laughed, changed the subject, but I saw it, the shift, the tension, the first crack in their dynamic, and I realized something I had not expected. I was not the only one watching. Daniel was watching too, and whatever he was seeing, he was not on Jason's side, not completely, and that mattered more than I understood at the time, because when everything finally fell apart on that wedding night, he was the only one in that room who already knew exactly what was about to be revealed. The proposal came on a night that felt almost too perfect, which should have been my first warning. It was late September, the air cool enough to need a jacket, the kind of Chicago evening where the city lights reflect off the river like everything is glowing on purpose. Jason had reserved a private table at a restaurant overlooking the water, the kind of place where the menu does not list prices, and I remember thinking, he is performing, not for me, but for the version of me he believes exists, the version he thinks he understands. Dinner was flawless, he was attentive, charming, even kind in a way I had not seen in months, and for a moment, just a moment, I wondered if I had been wrong about him, if maybe I had misread the pattern, if maybe he was capable of seeing me beyond whatever number he had assigned in his head. Then the ring came out, simple, elegant, but not extravagant, which told me everything I needed to know. He had chosen something that looked valuable, but was not excessive, something that matched what he believed I deserved. "Emily," he said, standing up, drawing attention from the surrounding tables, "I think we make sense. Not we are in love. Not I cannot live without you, we make sense. Like we were a business decision, like we were a merger." And I felt something settle inside me. Not heartbreak, not excitement, clarity, because in that moment I understood exactly what this was, and I said yes. Not because I believed in him, but because I needed to see it through to the end. I needed him to finish what he had been building from the beginning. The months that followed were a study in contrast. Wedding planning became his stage, not ours. He chose the venue, a ballroom in downtown Chicago with crystal chandeliers and a guest capacity of over 300. He chose the menu, the band, even the seating chart. Everything had to reflect status, presentation, value, and every time I suggested something smaller, something more personal, he would smile and say, "This is not just about us. It is about what we represent." That word again, represent, as if our marriage was a statement to the world, not a commitment between two people. His mother became more involved as the date approached, calling daily, asking questions that were not really questions. "Have you considered how this will look?" Or, "Are you sure your side of the guest list aligns with the tone we are setting?" And I would answer politely, calmly, always the same way, giving them exactly what they expected. Nothing more, nothing less. Because the more comfortable they felt, the more they revealed. And Jason revealed more than anyone. One night, about 6 weeks before the wedding, we were finalizing the guest list. He was sitting across from me at his kitchen island, laptop open, scrolling through names, and he paused when he got to my side. "Do we really need all of these people?" he asked, not looking up. "They are not exactly relevant." That word again, relevant, and I felt it. The quiet shift from assumption to certainty. He did not see me as equal. He saw me as an accessory, something that needed to fit into his world, not something that had its own. I closed my notebook, looked at him, and asked, "What do you think I bring into this marriage?" It was the first direct question I had asked him in months. He leaned back, thinking, actually thinking, like he was calculating an answer. "You are supportive," he said finally. "You are easy, low maintenance that matters." And then, almost as an afterthought, "And you trust me." I nodded, like that was enough, like that was everything. But inside, something locked into place. I was not testing his love anymore. I was documenting his limits. Daniel noticed the shift. I could tell. He started asking me small questions when Jason was not around. Nothing obvious, just things like, "Are you okay with all of this?" Or, "Do you actually want this wedding?" And I would smile, say yes, because I was not ready to reveal anything yet, not even to him. But there was one moment, 2 weeks before the wedding, that changed the way I saw Daniel completely. We were at a rehearsal dinner planning meeting. Jason had stepped out to take a call. His mother was discussing table placements, and I was standing near the window when Daniel walked over, quiet as always. "He is going to push it too far," he said, not looking at me, just watching the street below. I felt my chest tighten slightly. "What do you mean?" I asked. Keeping my voice steady, he glanced at me then, just for a second. "You already know what I mean," he said, and there was something in his tone, not pity, not judgment, certainty, like he had already seen the ending, like he was waiting for it. And then he added, softer, "Just make sure you are ready when he does," and walked away, leaving me standing there with a realization I could not ignore anymore. This was not going to end quietly. This was not going to be a simple mistake or misunderstanding. This was going to be public, deliberate, and final. And for the first time, I allowed myself to think it clearly. I was not walking into a wedding. I was walking into a reveal, and the only question left was not whether Jason would fail, but how far he would go before he did. The morning of the wedding felt quiet in a way that did not match the scale of what was about to happen. The kind of quiet that sits under your skin, steady and controlled, like everything is holding its breath. I woke up at 5:30 in a suite overlooking the Chicago skyline, sunlight just starting to break between the buildings, painting everything in soft gold, and for a moment, standing there in a silk robe I did not choose, in a room filled with flowers someone else picked, I felt completely detached from it all, like I was watching someone else's life unfold. The schedule was already laid out down to the minute. Hair at 7, makeup at 8, photographer at 9, everything timed, everything precise, just the way Jason liked it. I moved through it calmly, answering questions, smiling when expected, letting them pin, adjust, fix, perfect, all while my mind stayed somewhere else entirely, not on the ceremony, not on the vows, but on the moment I knew was coming, the moment he would finally say out loud what he had been showing me for months. By noon, the suite was full, bridesmaids laughing, champagne glasses clinking, the low hum of excitement filling the air. But I noticed something small, something almost invisible. My phone sitting on the table, screen lighting up once, then again, then going still. I walked over when no one was looking and checked it. One message. From Daniel. No emojis. No extra words. Just one sentence. Are you ready for him to show everyone who he really is? I stared at it for a second, longer than I should have, then locked the screen and placed the phone face down. My answer was not something I needed to send. It was something I had already decided months ago. By the time I stepped into the dress, the room shifted. Conversations softened. Eyes lingered. It was exactly the reaction Jason wanted. The image, the presentation, the proof that everything about today was worth what it cost. The dress fit perfectly. Of course it did. Everything about this wedding was designed to look effortless, flawless, valuable. I looked at myself in the mirror, took in the details, the clean lines, the soft lace, the way it framed someone who looked composed, confident, untouched. And I thought, he has no idea who he is about to humiliate. The ceremony space was even more elaborate than I remembered. Rows of white chairs, a long aisle lined with arrangements that probably cost more than my entire apartment. The chandelier overhead catching every piece of light and scattering it across the room. 300 guests, maybe more, voices blending into a low murmur that stopped the second the music started. I walked down that aisle slowly, measured steps, every eye on me, and I could feel it. Not nerves, not fear, anticipation, because this was it. This was the stage he had built. The moment he believed he controlled, Jason stood at the front, perfectly dressed, perfectly composed, smiling in a way that looked convincing to anyone who did not know him. His family sat in the front row, his mother already watching me with that same assessing expression, like she was waiting for something to confirm what she had always believed. I reached the end of the aisle, stood across from him, and for a brief second, just one, everything was still. The officiant began, the usual words, the formal structure, the questions everyone expects, and then it happened. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but with a shift so subtle you could miss it if you were not looking. Jason's expression changed, just slightly, his smile tightening, his eyes losing something. And I knew he was about to do it. The officiant turned to him, asked if he took me to be his wife, and instead of answering, he exhaled slowly, shook his head once, like he was disappointed, not in himself, but in the situation, in me. And then he spoke, clear, calm, loud enough for every person in that room to hear, "I cannot do this." A ripple moved through the guests, confusion first, then curiosity, then silence. And he continued, because of course he did. He had waited too long for this moment to waste it. I have spent months trying to convince myself that this makes sense, but it does not. He turned slightly, gesturing, not touching me, just indicating my presence like I was part of an argument he was making. Marriage is a partnership. It is about building something, about equal contribution, and I cannot marry someone who brings nothing to the table. There it was, not hidden, not softened, exactly what he believed, exactly what he wanted everyone else to believe too. A few people shifted in their seats. Some looked at me, others looked away. His mother nodded faintly, like this was confirmation, not a shock, and I stood there, holding my bouquet, perfectly still, because this was the moment I had been waiting for, the moment everything he thought he understood would start to collapse. And then, just as the silence began to settle into something heavier, something final, a chair moved sharply somewhere behind him, a sound that cut through the room like a line being drawn, and I did not need to turn to know exactly who had just stood up. The sound of that chair scraping against the polished floor cut through the room sharper than Jason's words ever could, and for the first time since he started speaking, the attention shifted away from me. Daniel stepped forward slowly, not rushed, not emotional, just deliberate, like he had already decided exactly how this would go. And Jason turned, irritation flashing across his face for a split second before he forced a tight smile. "Not now, Daniel," he said under his breath. But the microphone caught enough of it for the front rows to hear. Daniel did not stop. He walked all the way up to the front, stopping just a few feet from us, close enough that I could see the calm in his expression, the kind of calm that does not come from confidence, but from certainty. He glanced at me briefly, just a second, and there was something there. Not surprise, not pity, acknowledgement. like we both understood what was happening without needing to say it. Then he turned to Jason. "You are sure about this?" he asked, his voice steady, not loud, but clear enough to carry in the silence. Jason let out a short laugh, the kind he used when he thought something was beneath him. "I think I have made myself pretty clear," he replied, adjusting his jacket slightly, like this was still his moment, like he was still in control. Daniel nodded once, slow, thoughtful, like he was confirming something he already knew. "You said she brings nothing to the table," he continued. And now a few more people were leaning forward, the room shifting from confusion to curiosity. Jason's mother frowned slightly, sensing something, but not yet understanding what. "That is what you said, right?" Daniel repeated, and Jason's smile tightened. "Yes," he said, more firmly this time. "That is exactly what I said." And that was the moment Daniel reached into the inside pocket of his suit jacket. Not quickly, not dramatically, just a simple movement that somehow drew every eye in the room. He pulled out a folded document, crisp, deliberate, and held it between his fingers for a second before looking back at Jason. "Then you should probably explain this," he said. Extending it toward him, Jason hesitated, just for a fraction of a second, before taking it, unfolding it with a slight impatience, like he expected it to be irrelevant, like this was an interruption, not a turning point. I watched his face as his eyes moved across the page. The shift was immediate, subtle but unmistakable. The confidence drained first, replaced by something sharper, confusion, then something heavier, realization. His posture changed, just slightly, his shoulders tightening, his grip on the paper adjusting like it suddenly weighed more than it should. "What is this?" he asked, his voice lower now, not projecting to the room anymore, just to Daniel, but the microphone still caught it, still carried it. Daniel did not answer right away. He let the silence stretch, just long enough for everyone to feel it. Then he spoke. "It is a summary of Carter Holdings," he said calmly, and there it was, my last name. Not as something small, not as something forgettable, but as something that carried weight, something that meant something. A murmur started to ripple through the guests, quiet at first, then building. Jason's mother leaned forward, trying to see the document from where she sat. His father's expression hardened, calculating. "You might want to keep reading," Daniel added, his tone unchanged. Jason's eyes dropped back to the page, scanning faster now, less controlled, and I could see it. The moment the pieces started to connect, the moment the version of me he had built in his mind began to collapse under the weight of information he had never bothered to ask for. "This is not funny," he said. But there was no humor in his voice, only tension, only the sound of someone realizing they had miscalculated something important. Daniel tilted his head slightly. "I am not joking," he replied. Then, after a brief pause, "You spent months evaluating her value, Jason. You just never asked the right questions." The room was no longer silent now, whispers moving from row to row, people turning, looking at me differently, not with pity, not with curiosity, but with something else, recognition. And I stood there, still holding the bouquet, still exactly where he had left me, because this was not the moment to speak. This was the moment to let him understand, to let him feel exactly what he had tried to do. Jason looked up from the document slowly, his eyes locking onto mine, searching, recalculating, like he was trying to reconcile two versions of reality that no longer matched. "Emily," he started, but the way he said my name had changed. The certainty was gone, replaced by something uncertain, almost careful. And for the first time that entire day, he did not look like the one in control. And Daniel, still standing between us, spoke one more time, quieter now, but sharper than anything he had said before. "She was never the one being tested," he said. "You were." The ballroom looked different after that moment, not because anything physically changed. The same chandelier still hung overhead, the same flowers still lined the aisle, the same 300 guests still filled the room, but something invisible had shifted, like the air itself had cleared, like a truth that had been quietly building for months had finally surfaced and refused to go back down. I remember walking out of that room not with anger, not with tears, but with a kind of stillness I had never felt before. The kind that comes when something ends exactly the way it was always going to, and you finally stop trying to change it. The dress that once felt heavy now felt irrelevant. The whispers behind me faded quickly, and for the first time in a long time, I was not performing. I was not measuring. I was simply leaving. Weeks have passed since that day. My life now is quieter, smaller in ways that matter, but also clearer. I wake up in a space that feels like mine again, not defined by someone else's expectations, not shaped by someone else's idea of value. The business I kept hidden for so long is no longer something I downplay or protect from judgment. It is simply part of who I am, and more importantly, I am learning how to exist without needing to prove that to anyone. Jason reached out, more than once, messages that started with confusion, then shifted into apologies, then into explanations, as if rewriting the story could somehow undo what he revealed about himself that night. I did not respond, not out of anger, but out of clarity, because some things, once seen, cannot be unseen, and some boundaries, once drawn, are not meant to be erased. Daniel and I spoke once after everything. Just once. Over coffee in a quiet place where no one recognized us. He did not ask for anything, did not expect anything. He simply said, "You already knew, did not you?" And I nodded because I had. Not all at once, not perfectly, but piece by piece. My instincts had been speaking long before my mind was ready to listen. And that might be the most important thing I learned from all of this. That your intuition does not shout, it whispers. It shows you patterns. It nudges you in quiet moments. And the longer you ignore it, the louder the consequences become. If you take anything from my story, let it be this. Do not let anyone define your worth based on what they can measure: money, status, appearance. None of those things hold real value if they come at the cost of your self-respect. Love that needs to evaluate you is not love. It is a transaction, and you were never meant to be something someone calculates. Protect your emotional boundaries the same way you would protect your financial ones. Be mindful of who you allow into your life, who you trust with your vulnerability, and most importantly, who you allow to speak into your sense of self, because not everyone deserves that access. If you are listening to this and you feel like you are constantly being measured, compared, or made to feel like you are not enough, I want you to know that the problem is not you. It never was. The right people do not make you earn your place in their life. They recognize it, they respect it, and they do not ask you to shrink to fit their expectations. Sometimes the hardest thing is not letting go of someone else. It is letting go of the version of yourself that kept trying to be enough for the wrong person. Healing is not loud. It is not dramatic. It is quiet, consistent, and often uncomfortable, but it is worth it. Because on the other side of it, you find something no one can take from you. Your sense of self, your peace, your freedom. I believe that whether you call it God, the universe, or something deeper within you, there is a guiding force that keeps showing you the truth, even when you are not ready to accept it. Trust that. Trust yourself, because you are stronger than the roles people try to place you in, and you are allowed to walk away from anything that asks you to be less than who you are. Thank you for staying with me through this, for listening, for understanding in ways that words cannot always capture. Stories like this can feel isolating when you are living them, but sharing them reminds us that we are not alone, that there are others who see, who feel, who have walked similar paths and come out the other side. If this resonated with you, feel free to share your own story, your city, your time, your experience, because connection is how we heal, and none of us were meant to carry these things alone. My name is Emily Carter. I am 29 years old, and the lesson I want to leave you with is this. Never let anyone assign a price to your worth when you were never meant to be something that could be bought.